I always have to get my monitor screen up. This is going to be a good one, though. This will be a good one. Thank you guys for checking in, as always, at Underworld Chronicles. And I've got a really good topic I want to discuss for the audience today. This is a good one. I'm feeling good about this one. So let me get everything set up here. All right. So today we're going to be talking about one of the best challenges of all time. You know, one of the most fabled feats in the history of the mythological world. The ultimate challenge, the descent into the underworld. And if you've been watching recently, I made a reference to Inanna making a descent into the underworld. And then I felt like there was possibly, like 3 other people who had made that descent into the underworld, made it back. Lots of people obviously make the descent to the underworld, almost everybody. But there's just a small select group of people who have said, I went into the underworld, I said, what's up? Did whatever I had to do, I made it back up out of the underworld, under whatever conditions. I thought that number was really low. I thought that number was at as low as 3. Turns out that I was incorrect. So I did a little research for you guys here. And here is what we have is basically a list of everyone who made it to the underworld and came back. Right? It's a short list, still relatively short list. I said 3. What we're actually looking at is like 7 people here that actually can claim this. Okay. So who has gone into the underworld? Who's taken on that challenge? The ultimate test of your godly or divine power. Well, obviously you can see the first guy here, probably the most famous for descending into the underworld, is Jesus, who famously is crucified and is buried, and 3 days later he goes to the underworld, he defeats death as he had prophesied, and then he's reborn after 3 days. And this becomes a major event and is the cornerstone for Christianity to this day. This was the event that garnered what has become a following of 2.8 million people, something like that. Some 2.8 billion people, I think, is what the number we give for active Christians, right? So this is a major event in the history of the world, the resurrection or descent of Jesus Christ into the underworld. So he's the most famous. I'm going to say he's repping it the most. Then obviously we all here because we know about Inanna. And Inanna's very infamous descent into the underworld. Whereas Jesus was descending to the underworld to, at least help everybody, in death for everybody, eternal life. Inanna was just going for her own purposes. There was no good being done in Inanna's descent to the underworld. So let me tell you that right now. That's a big, giant difference between her and Jesus. See that right off the bat. So Inanna, of course, though, similarly to Jesus, however, oddly similar to Jesus, Inanna goes on to her descent to the underworld. She also dies. She's also physically killed, and she's also resurrected, and it also happens to be within 3 days. I don't know which story came first, Inanna or Jesus Christ. Maybe one of you guys can figure that one out. But that's the story of Inanna, right? Now, ironically, Inanna's descent into the underworld would lead to a couple of other unfortunate descents to the underworld. And you'll see right next to here is Dumuzi, who had the misfortune of being Inanna's husband. And when Inanna, when they traded Inanna's freedom from the underworld, it came at a price, came at a sacrifice. Sacrifice had to be made. So they went to Dumuzi, and she was okay with her husband because he didn't mourn her properly. He had the wrong clothes on. Literally, he was supposed to be wearing a bag, but he had on a suit. He was supposed to be looking like a pauper, but he looked like a king, which is what he was. And when she saw that, she said he did not mourn properly, so he can go. Problem with that is he was, of course, the shepherd who was associated with vegetation, and when he went to the underworld, all the crops started dying off. So in order to balance that out, they needed to sacrifice his sister here, who is Tanya, right? And so she has to spend, unrelated, she didn't even do anything wrong, her misfortune was being married to the guy, or excuse me, her misfortune was being the sister of the guy who married Inanna, who had descended into the underworld purely for takeover purposes. So now she has to go to the underworld for 6 months. The Muzid has to go for 6 months. Inanna, the one who started the whole business, gets to keep living above ground. Completely ironic story. But so those are 4 people so far that we have seen descend to the underworld and come back. Now, the next one here is probably of equal fame, at least, and that is Persephone herself, who is the queen of having to go to the underworld for 6 months out of the year. Very famous in Greek mythology. We know her story. She was just a fair maiden. She was out picking flowers. That was a very popular thing to do in Greece at that time. So she was out there. I mean, her mother was the goddess Demeter, who was all about agriculture, which is a very good job in that pantheon. You got a lot of accolades and praise, and it all trickled down to the children. So Persephone had a very, very sweet gig. Peace to Ma University there. And Persephone had a very sweet gig. So she's out picking flowers because she has nothing better to do. And unfortunately for her, Hades, who is the god of the underworld, sees her. It's like it's on. He grabs her, snatches her up. Now we all know what happens from that point. She eats the seed of a pomegranate. Now she is forced to spend 6 months of the year underground. And that's only to please her mother. So you can see she looks absolutely distraught. Absolutely distraught in that image there. Then we have the next image here, and this is the Greek musician Orpheus, who descent famously. This is a great story. This is a story of the underworld and love and death and love. His girlfriend, his beloved Eurydice, gets again snatched up into the underworld. Like, I don't know if there's just a bunch of holes all around Greece where girls just fall into the underworld. So she ends up in the underworld, but he's like, I can't. She loves her so much that he says, okay, I'm going to descend into the underworld. I don't know anyone who's ever descended to the underworld and made it back to this point. I'm going to do this. So he descends into the underworld, and I mean, this is a dangerous place. This is worse than a really bad neighborhood. Okay, it's a horrible, but you never want to go to the underworld. You don't want to do this. You don't want to try this. But he descends to the underworld. He gets before Hades himself. And he's like, look, Hades, let me play for this. Is how confident he is in his skills, his musical skills. He says, look, Hades, let me play for you. And he plays for him. His music is so great that Hades says, I will allow you to leave, which is an amazing thing. And I'll also allow you to take your wife with you on the condition that you don't look back. You walk ahead of her and you have faith that I'm going to do the right thing all the way out. So he's walking and he can't do it, right? He's walking and he's like, hey, are you back there? And you can kind of hear her back there. Hey, are you there? Yeah, I'm here, honey. Something like that. But he can't take it. And ultimately, before he gets free of the underworld itself, he looks back to confirm his wife is there. And just like that, she vanishes right before his eyes. So this is a story but he himself did go to the underworld. Okay, the last one here is this guy, Perseus, who descended to the underworld purely for the reason of trying to free Persephone. That was his whole gambit. He decided that he had loved the goddess Persephone and that she deserved to be free of the underworld. So he takes with him his trusty servant, who is Perseus, I believe his name is, and they descend into the underworld just ready to do this, ready to handle this business. We're going to bring Persephone back, and then everything's going to be good all year round because Demeter will be happy all the time. It's a good plan. Terrible execution, and he ends up getting caught in the underworld very predictably. And of course, Hercules ends up having to come and fight to save him, and he ends up being freed. But his hand servant, unfortunately, doesn't, and he has to remain, even though all he was doing was working down there. I hate to see the regular guy get trampled on in these mythologies. Now, there's also one person I'm going to partially include in this. I'm not going to give him full credit, and that actually would be Gilgamesh, because we do remember that in his search to find the key to life, he goes to the realm of the dead and finds Epishinum, I believe his name is, who tells him like where he needs to find the gods at. So he technically gets to leave, Even though they know, well, you're just going to die later, so you're still going to come back here. But they technically did let him come to the underworld, and they let him leave. Now, the important thing about this is I've given you guys a lot of information about people who have descended to the underworld and the circumstances that which they came back. Most of them didn't really fully come back. You're there 6 months out of the year. We see a lot of you're doing half your life. You know, like you're getting parole. There's a lot of people that kind of get parole from the underworld, but you don't get to leave full time. So the full breakaway from the underworld is really the most breathtaking. And the only one who really did it by just some sheer force is Jesus. Sounds like he kind of just took over the scenery. Everyone else took some kind of negotiation and some type of sacrifice in order for you to get your freedom from the underworld. So this is a place that you don't want to go. You don't want to test the odds on the underworld, because I can tell you right now, the odds, my friend, do not look good. So anyway, that's just a tidbit of information I had for you guys today. Thank you for checking in at Nine World Chronicles. Thank you for being active in our comment section as we grow our live sessions. Maybe I'll start telling you guys beforehand when I'm going to do this. Thank you again. Make sure you go and like and subscribe. And please, as always, please go and watch more